Thank you for joining us today. I'm Laura Polari-Welbus, Director of Encore Learning, for today's Encore Learning Presents Mental Health, the Signs and Ways to Help Someone with Potential Mental Health Conditions. We'll hear more about that in a moment. Before we get started, just to remind you some tips for our Zoom webinar. We invite you to submit questions in the Q&A function. And so you just click on the Q&A icon and you can post the questions. And for this presentation today, Darcy will be speaking for about 45 minutes, and then we'll have lots of time for questions. Our special events chair, Louise Kenny, will raise the questions for our speaker to address. Know that you can turn on live transcript from your own menu. And when you leave the webinar, you will be invited to take a survey. So please do that. We appreciate the feedback. If you have any issues with Zoom, having a problem, feel free to send us an email at info@encorelearning.net. And now Louise Kenny, our special events chair, is going to tell us about what is coming up for Encore Learning special events.
Hello, everybody. I think you recognize me from a number of our special events presentations and also our tours. We do two things: special events on Mondays and then also tours throughout the week on prominent places here in Washington. We have two events coming up. One is about the Planet Word Museum, an adventure in words with the founder, Anne Friedman. Anne Friedman took about 7 years to create this museum. So she's going to be talking to us about what motivated her, all about the museum itself. And then also there's always some new interactive things going on there. So she's going to talk to us about that. That's on June 9th. And then we'll also have a virtual tour of the American Visionary Art Museum in Baltimore, Maryland. There's registration is required on that, so just make note of that. But that will also be a Zoom presentation on June 18th, which is a Monday from 3 to 4:30. So that's what's coming up. And we also have things over the summer that will slowly feed into you. We have a really good presentation today. You know, we're also aware of mental health, particularly this month, which is Mental Health Month, Mental Health Awareness Month, but also in light of everything that's happening in our country, there's a lot of stress, there's a lot of mental health issues. So we thought it'd be very helpful to introduce you to Darcy Gruttadaro, who is with the National Alliance of Mental Illness, based here in Arlington, but it's got 600 plus branches or offices throughout the country. And she's going to be talking to us about what is mental health, what should we be looking out for, and if we know somebody with a potential mental health crisis or even an ongoing situation that's not in a crisis mode, what should we look for and what resources are available and really how to think about it. So Darcy is on the leadership team there. She is the Chief Innovation Officer, so she can be talking to us about what they've done in terms of innovation relative to mental health at their organization. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Darcy. Darcy?
Thank you so much, Louise, and thank you, Laura, for inviting me. I'm really happy to be here, and thank you for joining us on this beautiful day in Arlington. I am actually, I live in Arlington, Virginia, and our headquarters are in the Ballston area of Arlington, so a lot of connection to this community, and I know many of you are in the Northern Virginia area. I'm going to share some slides with you. I did want to share a little bit of a story before I get started about how I got into this field. I've been working in this field for about 20 years, and I actually started my career after law school. I worked for a federal judge for 2 years, and then I started working at a law firm, and we had a hospital client, several hospital clients actually, and one of them had a psychiatric unit. And I got very interested in addressing some of the issues that were coming up as part of that work, including doing some commitment hearings and some medication over objection hearings. And I just got very interested in all the ways we could do a better job at more effectively addressing mental health. And what hadn't played a significant role in my life up to that point was sort of the reality that we had very much close to home experience with mental illness in my family. My mother had lost her mother to suicide when my mother was 14, and my father had lost his father to suicide when my parents were married, and they were in their 20s, later 20s. So that had been very quiet and something we hadn't talked about a lot. Stigma runs very high at times when it comes to mental health issues, but I found that when I moved to DC and really got interested in policy and working on policy and government relations issues for NAMI, that my family suddenly started to open up more about mental health. And mental health became a topic that we saw intergenerationally and that we recognized was something we needed to talk more about and that it didn't have to be a taboo topic. So I've been at NAMI. I was there 17 years. I left in 2017 to go work at the American Psychiatric Association Foundation for 5 years, and I returned to NAMI in October of 2022. I followed the chief executive officer at NAMI now, who had been at the foundation, back to NAMI. He's a wonderful leader, and we're very lucky to have him. So I've been here now for 3 years. And as the Chief Innovation Officer, I cover three broad areas, which is youth and young adults, workplace mental health, which is a very, very sought after topic now for businesses, recognizing the impact that mental health can have on the workplace regardless of industry. And then also cross-cultural innovation and engagement. So we're doing a lot of work in different diverse communities because we know that mental health knows no political boundaries. It knows no racial or socioeconomic boundaries. It is an issue that can impact people just across the board. So I did want to mention that I'm going to talk a little bit about self-harm, and I just want to be cautious to let folks know that. I know that can be a tricky topic for some, so I did want to mention that right up front. I'm going to talk a little bit about self-harm and some issues that come up around suicide and some of the issues that can play a role for families and individuals in that area. So I'm going to start with my slides. Switch my display here. Okay. So hopefully many of you know who NAMI is. We are a national organization. We are the nation's largest grassroots mental health organization. As Lois shared, we have 650 affiliates around the country. We have a NAMI state organization in every state capital, and our NAMI state organizations do a lot of advocacy at the state legislative level and with the executive branch of the state governments. We also have a number of affiliates that are around the state that work with the state office. So we are really quite a large organization headquartered right here in Arlington, Virginia. And we provide education, advocacy, support, and guidance. And this quote at the bottom rings so true for us, which is NAMI is where people go while they wait for the world to change. We know that navigating mental health care is extraordinarily difficult. And so NAMI is here to provide support while people attempt to navigate care and or during, before, and after they either experience a condition themselves or someone they love or a family member experiences it as well. I think Lois said it quite well, that our mental health is really being tested. It has been tested over many years, but it really got tested in 2020. We saw COVID taking a big hit on many people's mental health. But in 2025, we still are experiencing some issues that can be extraordinarily stressful for so many. Global polarization, I don't have to remind any of you that the world is very difficult, especially around racial and political tension. We are a very divided world right now. I think people are feeling grief and loss at some of the changes and disruptions that are taking place, regardless of your political affiliation. NAMI is a nonpartisan organization, so we represent all political perspectives. Certainly economic and financial uncertainty. As human beings, we rely on certainty and having some level of control over our worlds and what we're experiencing. And when that's not the case, it can be really challenging for us as part of the human condition. Also, isolation and loneliness. Dr. Vivek Murthy, who was the Surgeon General under President Obama, and then came back again to be Surgeon General under President Biden, has been a real proponent of the pandemic we are experiencing in this country around loneliness. I spent yesterday learning a whole lot more about Encore Learning, and have to say it's a really impressive community, and it's really about community when it comes to loneliness and finding a place of belonging and feeling like you're part of the social connectedness that we know is really essential for health and well-being, but also is very important to our mental health. Climate change, storms are happening around the country where our loved ones may be, or in our own backyard, that are more fierce, that are more frightening for so many, and that really concern us. And also sustained stress and disruption. This excessive stress can lead to burnout. I know businesses around the country, we work with a lot of businesses across industries. They're really concerned about burnout. It's not just burnout in the workplace, though, it's burnout in our own lives. So recognizing that excessive stress can lead to burnout, which can actually lead to people developing mental health symptoms and mental health conditions like depression, like anxiety, most commonly, like substance use and others. So a lot to think about in terms of our current state of our world. And when we think about mental health, the first thing we always say is we all have mental health. It's not as if mental health is over here in this other area of life. It's like we all have it. And it doesn't move in a straight line. I don't think I need to tell any of you that. I think you probably all know that what happens in our lives can have a major impact, whether it's loss, whether it's health issues, whether it's joy. Our mental health can be in a really important place as well, in a really positive place. I will say, because at NAMI we do engage in storytelling as part of our just, I think, making these issues very relatable. I'll share two health issues that I have had that have been a little bit extraordinary. One is that in August of 2011, I was actually struck by lightning in Arlington at the corner of Highland and Key Boulevard here in Clarendon, close to where I live. I happened to be walking up to the running store, the race store in Clarendon, and my husband and I were walking back from there, and I was struck by lightning and flatlined. And it was quite a story in my neighborhood, and it actually made the news in the Washington, D.C. region. My husband actually had to perform CPR and revive me. I did receive some burns that led me to spend 14 days on the burn unit at Washington Hospital Center. It was really quite dramatic, and I was out of work for 7 weeks. So that was really jolting, obviously, to my mental health, but also to my physical health. I did experience some burns, and it was really quite scary. And I had my own experience with PTSD and how life can just be so random. It's a great story that I can now tell. At the time, it wasn't such a great story, but even my kids say, Mom, it was like the best story I could tell anyone. So I fully recovered from that. I will say that most recently, I was sharing with Laura that I've been under a lot of stress. It's been very busy at work, and I actually lost my mom in March. So had my own experience with grief and loss, and I suddenly developed double vision, which I had never had before. In the 3 years I've been back at NAMI, I've missed 2 days of work. I'm really quite a healthy person. But I suddenly developed double vision, which at a distance and close up, which prevented me from driving and from reading, from looking at my computer, and it was quite scary. And I went to an ophthalmologist and had a full workup, and she said, there's nothing wrong with your eyes. And then I went, and of course they gave me all these scary terms. Maybe it's could be a stroke, could be a brain tumor, could be any number, MS. They shared a lot of things that were scary to me, and I did a whole lot of tests, and it turned out that it was none of those, fortunately. But it was really jolting to have that experience, and it turned out it's very likely that it was an atypical migraine, which I've never had before, and or stress related. So all that to say, our mental health does travel along a journey. I have fully recovered. I have no double vision anymore. It lasted about 2.5 weeks, but for me, it was quite scary. And I've been meditating and taking time away from the screen and recognizing that I have to really take care of my eyes and my just my mental well-being overall. So I did want to share those just because they're a little bit random, and life can be random, and our health and well-being can really be random. And I love this idea of mental health existing along a continuum. And in April of 2021, as we were in the throes of the pandemic, Adam Grant, some of you may know Adam Grant, he's at Wharton. He's an occupational psychologist, very well known. He wrote this article for the New York Times talking about how mental health exists along a continuum. And he sort of coined this term languishing. But he explained, like, we can be, as I said, flourishing at the peak of well-being, having a strong sense of fulfillment, purpose, and happiness. We can also be languishing where we just aren't feeling ourselves and our well-being is just not where it should be, and feel a lack of motivation and focus. Or we can actually have a diagnosable mental health condition, which are common. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how common, but we can enter into the area of depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, PTSD, substance use disorder, or any of the above and more. So again, a continuum, and even with conditions, with proper treatment and taking good care of ourselves, we can really get to a point where we are doing well and we're getting the kind of treatment that helps us to do well. So it's this just interesting idea of mental health, all having mental health, existing along a continuum, and really shifting at various points. So, as I said, mental health conditions are common. 50% of all lifetime cases of mental health conditions start by age 14. That's according to the NIMH, the National Institute of Mental Health, which has done extensive research, epidemiological research. 75% start by age 25. So the former director of NIMH was very fond of saying these are conditions that start young in life. Unlike many other health conditions, these start young in life when people have a diagnosable condition. 20% of people live with a mental illness in this country. 1 in 20 live with a severe mental illness. So that tends to be, there's my dog. Apologies. That must mean my mail is here. 1 in 20 live with a severe mental illness. Again, more in line with bipolar disorder, although people with bipolar disorder can do quite well and not be on the severe end. It also exists along a continuum, and schizophrenia. But many more than the 20% or 1 in 5 experience symptoms of mental health conditions. So people can have symptoms but never develop full-blown conditions. And that's also important to know because, again, that continuum that I talked about a moment ago is real. I did want to mention, too, that the research shows that only about half of people that live with mental health conditions and diagnosable conditions actually receive treatment. And there are a lot of reasons why that's true, but we know there are barriers to people getting the help they need. One is stigma and people being unwilling to get help or not wanting to get help. There's also major challenges around people connecting with care. But what we know is that having support in the community is important for everyone. So we know that when people have mental health symptoms or conditions, it can avoid, when they have support, feelings of isolation and loneliness. It can be very lonely when you receive a diagnosis, or someone in your family does, or you're supporting someone who does. You can avoid that loss of purpose and motivation that can come with getting a diagnosis or getting treatment or just feeling not like yourself. Support also avoids additional adverse physical and mental health consequences. We know that when people have depression, that can impact their physical health. We know when people have physical health conditions, that can impact their mental health. If someone gets a diagnosis of cancer, for example, it's not unusual for them to also develop depression. As you can well imagine, these are co-traveling conditions often, not always. Also, having support obviously helps to avoid strained relationships, and it reduces the risk of self-harm, which is extraordinarily important. So I did want to share some of the early warning signs of mental health conditions, and also to say that some of these things you may see in another individual can also be just part of the human condition, people having a bad day, people just having something happen in a relationship in their life, something happening in a community activity. What generally clinicians, and I'm not a clinician, but I certainly have talked to many, what they really look at is whether there's a noticeable and sustained for 2 weeks or more real change in someone. So this is like, gosh, Darcy doesn't seem like herself. It's not just a one-day thing. I'm really seeing that happening over time, and I'm really concerned about it. And it really focuses in 4 broad areas. So the way someone feels, the way they act, the way they look, and the way they think. So someone in terms of feels may suddenly, you may see a change where they're more irritable or angry. They have extreme worry and fear for no obvious reason or no rational or reasonable reason to be worried and fearful. Extreme highs and lows, again, over a sustained period, and feeling easily overwhelmed. This is someone who wouldn't ordinarily be overwhelmed, but is suddenly really overwhelmed. So someone who may be experiencing signs of a mental health concern may act more withdrawn. They may be someone who's social and generally comes to events, and suddenly they're not showing up at all for a sustained period. They may be overly interactive, so really acting unlike themselves because they're very outward and they're not typically like that. Sleep and appetite changes are another sign, along with drop in energy. There may be stepped up alcohol or drug use, or they may be later absent, like someone who generally shows up on time. I mean, missing one, late show up is not, or late in showing up is not a real concern unless you're seeing it over, again, a sustained period. They may look exhausted and have very low energy, which sometimes we all do, right? But it's just, again, that sustained period. Any weight loss or gain that's sudden and excessive. They're messy. They look messy when they're ordinarily pretty put together, and we all have messy days, but this is like really, the looks have really changed. They're fidgety and have extreme nervousness. And then the thought process. This is not easy to see all the time, but someone may be really quite confused. And again, all of these things could also have physical manifestations in other issues that are happening physically to us. We may be developing health conditions that may cause us to think differently, other health conditions, but major changes in concentration, persistently negative thoughts, and hopelessness and self-harm, just this sort of, gosh, I don't really know. I don't want to burden people anymore. I don't want to be a burden to others. And people they start giving things away. Those are true signs that to worry about self-harm and thoughts around it. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what you might say. And again, you might check in with someone and they might be absolutely fine and just say, I've had a few weeks of some pretty tough days or something extreme happened in my life, but it's always good to check in. This is really about checking in on each other. So this is sort of the do's and don'ts in holding a conversation. And I'm going to start with the don'ts. And some of these are challenging. At least they're challenging for me. Like there's such a tendency to jump in with solutions. When someone's just not themselves, you kind of say, oh, I know exactly what to do. Here's what you should do. And it's often better to just be a really good listener and let someone process and share. It's good not to talk about diagnoses unless you're a clinician and you specialize in mental health conditions. You're a therapist, you're a counselor, you're a psychiatrist, you're a primary care doc or an internist or surgeon, and you really have studied these well. So it's best not to talk about diagnoses unless you're really trained. It's best not to minimize or invalidate, like I know someone who, or I know how you feel, or it could be worse. That can just make someone shut down a bit. worry about having all the answers. Sometimes mental health is a taboo topic. If you're concerned, again, you don't know for sure, but you're kind of wondering, is this person depressed? Are they feeling anxious? It's sometimes we've heard from many people that they don't know what to say, so they don't say anything at all because they worry they won't have all the answers. And again, that's what people really appreciate is that you really show that you care and that you say something. Or pressure a person into sharing. Not everyone wants to share, and that's perfectly okay too. I'm going to talk a little bit about when self-harm may be an issue, and you probably don't want to just let someone say, I'm good, and let them go on their way, because there's risk there, of course. But we never want to pressure someone. I mean, everybody has a right to their private health information, and nobody has to share if they're uncomfortable doing so and they're not at risk of harm. And then don't go it alone. If you're worried about someone who may be at risk of self-harm, and I'm going to talk on the next slide about what to do if you're worried about someone who may be at risk of self-harm. Don't go it alone. Involve another trusted adult who you think really has this person's best interest in mind as well. So the do's, best to start with an open-ended question, and be objective. Like, I've noticed, Darcy, you haven't seemed like yourself lately. Here's what I'm seeing. And I just want to check in. How are you doing? And it's best to try to make it not a yes or no, because people will say, I'm fine. And they may still say that. So that's a risk, of course. But if you can think of a good open-ended question, that's great. And leading with empathy and compassion, really gentle, calm, empathetic, really trying to help the person feel comfortable, because people don't always like to talk about mental health. It's just not a topic we spend a lot of time talking about in general. And then, of course, actively listening and reflecting on what you've heard. Once you've given the person a real chance to process, sometimes when people process, they can feel much better. And then once the person has had a chance to share, really thanking them for trusting you. That can go a long way towards someone feeling that empathy and compassion. And we always say at NAMI, and you're going to see that one of our books are called You Are Not Alone. But saying it out loud that you are not alone and support is available can really, because people often feel very alone and lonely when they experience a diagnosis of a mental health condition. People can feel alone on any physical health condition diagnosis and not just know exactly how they should feel, but they can often feel alone when it's a mental health issue. And then you can actually offer support in exploring options. Like, wow, once you've, heard them and you've had a chance to really allow them to process, you can always ask, do you want me to support you through connecting with services or supports or options? They may not want you to at all, but you can offer that up. And again, as I said, respect privacy and boundaries. And really, if someone mentions anything about being at risk of self-harm, the most important thing is to take it seriously. So chances are, if someone mentions it and mentions they may be at risk, it is really important to take it seriously. So that sort of leads me into the next point about, are you worried about someone who may be at risk of self-harm? And again, if this is a topic that anyone finds really difficult, I would say, I understand. And I'm going to talk a little bit about suicide and the risk of suicide. Suicide is on the rise again, and it is a major public health concern. We lose to suicide about 49,500 people. That's the last data we have available, about a person every 11 minutes in this country to suicide. So it is a big concern. It is the second leading cause of death for 10 to 14-year-olds, if you can believe that, after accidents. So we are very worried about young people. But if someone tells you they need help, and if they mention self-harm, it's really important to believe them. I had the good fortune of working with a researcher at Columbia University a number of years ago who worked on child suicide risk, and Dr. David Schaffer. And he did some research where they had a chance to actually talk to young people who had attempted suicide and had a chance to ask them, why didn't you tell someone? Or why didn't you share that you were at risk of suicide before you attempted? And a number of them said, well, nobody asked, even though they were showing signs of being at risk. So there was, for a long time, this belief that if you asked someone about suicide, you could, in fact, be planting the seed of risk for self-harm in that person. But that's been fully debunked. So being very direct with someone and asking them, are you at risk of self-harm? Are you at risk of suicide? Is really important. If you see someone who seems like they're on the extreme end of changes that really worry you. So again, if you're worried about someone, share what you see objectively. Ask the person directly if they're at risk of self-harm or suicide. If the person's not comfortable talking with you, it's good to ask them if there's another trusted adult, if there's someone else that they might be comfortable talking with, maybe a faith leader, someone in their family, or someone in the community they have a close relationship with. If they say they are at risk and they share that with you, it's really important to stay calm and listen. And then suggest that you'd really like to involve others so that together you can make sure the person has a connection to care, because connection is so important, and that you're not alone. Again, that reassurance, there's services, there's connection to counseling that can be very helpful for many people. Many people go through these experiences in life and come out just fine and getting the support they need. But also make sure you don't leave the person alone. That's just a standard important factor. The American Foundation for Suicide Prevention has wonderful resources. AFSP, we work a lot with them. But also take care of yourself. If you're supporting someone who may be at risk for self-harm, it can be very challenging on us. It can be really something that we have to make sure we take care of ourselves over, because it can be very difficult to experience that. I did want to mention that NAMI worked very hard at the federal legislative level to get the 3-digit 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline passed. The federal Congress passed legislation to support 988 in 2022. And you can call or text, you or anyone. And now I'm hearing this more and more and seeing it more and more out in the community, and on NPR, which I listen to, on radios, on television. Whenever there's a story about suicide or self-harm, you hear a lot about 988. So you can call or text 988. You can chat online, or you can share this information with anyone who would want to have addressed a mental health, substance use, or suicidal crisis. It doesn't have to be that someone's at a crisis level. These are trained counselors. So this is a nationwide free and confidential support. It's available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for people experiencing a crisis and needing to connect with and get a referral to care. Again, trained counselors, as I mentioned. There is a lot of information, free information on NAMI's website we created called reimaginecrisis.org. On there, you'll see, if you're interested in learning more, that there are a lot of organizations we work with. We call it the Crisis Jam. We have the American Medical Association, the American Pediatrics Association, any advocacy group out there that really exists across the country has worked very hard at this. Now, what we really need to continue to do is build the full continuum of care. It's not enough that we have a crisis line. We just do not have enough mental health services in this country, and we are working hard at that. And we need to fund services, and we know with changes that are happening through the federal budget that there is a lot of risk to states and funding that goes to states to build out the crisis response services. So we're very concerned about that, and we continue to advocate at federal and state and local levels to build out those services. And some states, and if you go to the Reimagine Crisis, if you're really interested in this, you'll see a US map that shows those states that have tacked additional fees onto telephone bills in states, phone bills to raise revenue, to build out 988 crisis services. So there's a lot of activity happening around this. There is a 988 network in Virginia. I put the website there. And there is also NAMI Northern Virginia has a wonderful chapter here that covers the entire Northern Virginia area. They have lots of free programming. They have resources, they have education programming, they have community activities. They're always looking for volunteers. If you are not someone who already volunteers, they're just a wonderful organization in the community. So we work with them a lot at the local level, and they do really, really tremendous work. So to just return to this whole idea, we all have mental health and what you can do to care for your own mental health. These are things that I'm sure are part of common sense, but sometimes it's just getting a reminder about it. I will say I have just been doing a little bit of research into meditation, which some of you may also have done. And I am learning that meditation actually changes your brain chemistry and really is very advantageous. I didn't put meditation on here. I mean, practicing relaxation techniques falls under meditation, but I've been really impressed with what I've learned about meditation most recently. And there are, by the way, a number of different apps that you can use if you're looking for guided meditation. I know there's guided meditation in the community. I'm sure it's available here in the Northern Virginia area. But really practicing relaxation techniques. What we've started to do before some of our meetings at NAMI is we have folks on our team that are really interested in mindfulness, and they'll do breathing techniques. There's this box breathing. I don't know if any of you have heard of it, where you kind of breathe in really a very deep breath for 4 seconds. You hold that for 4 seconds, and then you exhale for 4 seconds, and then you hold for 4, and then you breathe in again. So it's this whole idea of 4-second intervals with breathing, pausing, and exhaling. Very good for your overall health, but especially good for your mental well-being as well. Obviously, eat well and drink water. Spend time in nature. I understand some people went to the Nationals Park today. That's an amazing way to get outside, but also walking in the woods. And I did see on the Encore Learning site, there were some pictures of folks hiking, which is great. Also good research on spending time in nature. Take breaks, and I'm taking more breaks with my eyes from the screen. The screen can be taxing, whether it's the computer screen or your phone screen. Really important to take breaks there. Notice your thinking patterns. A lot of good research now on the benefits of journaling, which is another great way to keep track of your thinking patterns. Obviously, seek professional help if you're concerned about your mental health and well-being. A lot of my colleagues at work who are looking for therapists and really think they would benefit from therapy go to Psychology Today, which is a website that has a really nice network of therapists around the country that you can tap into. It shares what insurance they take, and you can kind of fill out a profile and they try to match you. But it's always important to find that therapeutic alliance that works best for you. And not everyone finds a good therapist or counselor right off the bat. Sometimes it takes a couple tries. Spend time with a pet. I don't know if you heard my dog barking. She is often under my desk, under my feet during the day. So I do take a little time out with her as well. As I said earlier, sleep and connecting with others, the social connectedness. I know Dr. Murthy, Vivek Murthy, is so big on this and talks a lot about belonging and community and how that is so good for our physical health and our mental health. And then, of course, exercise is really important too. So I just wanted to mention that NAMI is in the community. We are at the national level here in Arlington, but also NAMI Northern Virginia is here. Everything we have is free. So if you're interested in where it says in your community, a number of those are education programs and just programs for people to learn more about the experience of supporting someone, whether they're an adult, a child, a veteran. Homefront is a program for military and veterans and families of military and veterans. In Our Own Voice is an anti-stigma program we have where people who live with mental illness speak at community events. We could actually plan one for Encore Learning, really to break the idea that people have these myths and stereotypes around what mental illness really looks like. Ending the Silence is a program we do in schools. Hearts and Minds is a program that we do in community, and peer-to-peer is where people who live with diagnoses can connect with others. We have support groups. We have our helpline, which I would strongly encourage you to call if you're really feeling like you're looking for resources. I will say, the calls we are getting into our national helpline have gone way up since January. We are getting a lot of calls with people seeking connection to mental health support. I would say our calls are up 23% since January, so we're seeing a big jump there. We also work a lot with businesses, as I said, across industries. And I have a Google alert on my phone for workplace mental health, and I used to get about one media story a week. Now I get about 6 to 7 a day. So the business community is really concerned about mental health and well-being and how it impacts productivity, retention, um, people's recruitment, the expectations of employees at work. So especially younger employees, they really want to see mental health more visible. And they've made that clear through surveys and national surveys we've done with Ipsos and independent polling firms. I did want to mention, as I said, we have a medical director, Dr. Ken Duckworth. We have an associate medical director, Dr. Christine Crawford. We have 2 books. You Are Not Alone is more focused on the adult community. It is really a compilation of people's stories, whether they're experts. So there are docs and researchers and academics, but also people who are family members, people with diagnoses, people with serious mental illness, a lot of different people's experiences. And that book was so popular, we followed it up in 2024 with a book really focused on parents and caregivers of children and youth. Dr. Crawford is a board-certified child psychiatrist in Boston. They're both in Boston, actually, both affiliated with Harvard Medical School. They are our medical directors, and we have the great opportunity to work directly with them. They teach us all the time. We do at NAMI have Ask the Experts series that are free also. If you're interested in hearing from experts from around the world, frankly. Every year, NAMI gives out a $50,000 research award to researchers who are prominent in the field. So when we give out that award, we call them back a lot and ask for them to speak to us about all the areas they practice in, and it gives us the chance to learn from the best of the best, which is really a great opportunity for us. So that's us. We really like to say we're all about lived experience. And, we're right here in Northern Virginia, and I just really want to thank Encore Learning for offering this opportunity. May is Mental Health Awareness Month. This is what we call our Super Bowl, but we really want to focus on the fact that mental health impacts us every day. So it's not just something that we think about during May, but we know everyone else does. So just very happy to be here and to have a conversation. And the last thing I wanted to say is that I really always learn from those I get the chance to engage with. So I would love to hear your stories, your thoughts, and more, so that I can also learn from you. So I will I'll see if Lois has any questions.
Well, thank you. That was very
Louise, did I say Lois? Sorry.
Okay, not a problem. Well, thank you very much for that. The timing, this happens to be Mental Health Awareness Month, but also it's a tough time. It's a tough time for everybody. So thank you very much for taking the time to do this. We really appreciate it. So, and I'm glad that you're Laura's neighbor, so that she knew of you and could do that. So thank you. Okay, Q&A. Let me see if we have some questions. Please post your questions on the Q&A. I don't see, I see a question coming up right now. I can't seem to get it to react here.
I actually see it.
Oh, you do? Okay. I
yeah.
can't pull. You want to Ask it and answer it?
Yeah, I mean, I see the question of what to do with someone who mentioned she had suicidal thoughts. So I think that's
That's
a
the one.
really
Okay.
important question. And I would say to take it very seriously. It's a real cry for help. And what I would say is to ask the person if you can support them through the process of connecting with help. And it is really, you could suggest they call 988. I would not leave the person alone because I think they could be at risk of imminent harm if they're sharing they're suicidal. I will say though, there are a lot, it's not unusual. A high percentage, a high number of people have suicidal ideation. But if someone shares that they are suicidal, I would take it seriously. You can sit with them and call 988 and see what 988 recommends. You can go with them to an emergency room if that is, if 988 is not helpful to you. You can ask them how you might involve other adults and trusted adults in their lives because that's really important. But again, I would make sure you take it seriously and try the 988 crisis helpline, a crisis line, and also ask who else you can involve because that's a serious matter.
Thank you. Angela asks, how can I tell if my friend is experiencing early signs of Alzheimer's?
That is a very good question and something I am not an expert in. So I would suggest, and I don't even want to try to guess how to answer that because I do not know the answer to that. And we don't at NAMI cover Alzheimer's. We really focus on mental health conditions. So I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to that, and I don't want to take a guess at it. But
Thank
I
you.
would say, like anything, it's really lovely that you care. And I would say there are probably many reliable websites where you could find really reliable information about that. So I would encourage you to do that. And or maybe if you have medical professions in Encore Learning, or maybe you could have someone come and present on that. That's a really important topic.
Thank you. I do happen to know some people with the Alzheimer's, and their first step was to go to a neurologist and be
Mhm.
evaluated. And they have various tools, so that would be a suggestion also to offer.
Yeah.
So, okay. Anne asked the question, what's the best way to help someone who refuses to take their medication?
Oh, that's such a good question. That is, I would say one thing is the NAMI helpline has really good resources online. We have what's called a knowledge center. Um, because when someone's an adult and they refuse to take their medicine and they don't want to take it, it can be the most challenging situation for families. So I would encourage you to look at our helpline resources on that. But I would say it's a conversation to be had. Medications can have pretty tough side effect profiles, and it's often why people don't want to necessarily take their medicine. I would remind them of the benefits of, despite some of the difficult side effects, the benefits of taking medicine. I would ask them if what happens too sometimes is people are prescribed psychotropic medicines at a very high dose. And sometimes it's necessary, and sometimes there may be an opportunity to ask if they've talked to their doctor about their dose being adjusted to maybe make if the side effects are what are concerning to see if there might be an opportunity to change the dosage on the medicine. That's another option. There are all kinds of strategies. There's a great book, some people may be familiar with it, by Javier Amador called I'm Not Sick. I Don't Need My Medicine, something to that effect. It's a great book. I highly encourage you to read it. It's a short paperback book, and it's well worth the read because it has lots of strategies in it. His brother had schizophrenia, and he learned all the tricks around helping his brother to understand the value and importance of taking medicine.
Okay, thank you. Karen asked the question, when is the best time to ask someone, how can I help during an initial conversation?
I think that's a couple of important things. One is it's really important to be in a quiet, calm, private place, obviously, for obvious reasons. I think it's helpful to start with a warm kind of conversation first. So you've sort of established that nice rapport that is necessary. And then two, to really, it's okay to say, I'm not exactly sure how to ask this. And, but I care about you. And again, getting to that objective sort of, this is what I'm seeing, and I'm concerned, and I wonder if we might have a conversation. And really, it's always helpful if the person, I guess that's a yes or no, and I said open. So you could always say, I'm concerned about you, and I really want to have this conversation because I want to understand what you may be experiencing. So the right time to have it is really, sometimes you just have to gauge it, unless it's an emergency. If you think the person may be in crisis, then the right time to have it is in that moment. And just, again, stay calm, but to let them know you're really concerned and tell them exactly what you're seeing, but don't wait. And at that point, you can make the call as to whether, if you think it's imminent that this person's at risk, you can make the call as to whether you want to involve someone else at that moment.
Thank you. What is the role of Alphonse asked the question, what is the role of medication in mental health treatment?
Good question. It's one of the tools in the toolbox, as Dr. Ken Duckworth, our medical director, would say. So for certain conditions, like schizophrenia, when someone takes an antipsychotic, ideally very early in experiencing early psychosis, it can lessen the damage that can happen to your brain as part of having psychosis and it becoming more serious and severe. So for a condition like schizophrenia, having an antipsychotic can be extraordinarily important because it can help to lessen the long-term severity of your brain, the impact on your brain. For other conditions like depression and anxiety, you may or may not need to take medicine. Sometimes a clinician may put you on medicine to start and then ease you off as you engage in therapy. So, for example, with depression, if you're experiencing a slightly more serious case of depression, depending on how serious it is, sometimes clinicians who are well qualified will say, I want to put you on medicine and have you in therapy. The medicine will help you benefit from the therapy, but ultimately, depending on how this goes, you may be able to go off the medicine and just stick with the therapy. So it's very much dependent on what the treatment plan that gets developed by the clinician actually, what the clinician establishes the treatment plan to be. Now, the impact on the brain varies. And there's all different medicines. Some are mood stabilizers, some are, relate to the synapses in your brain. There's all different ways in which these medicines work. And again, I'm not a clinician, but for example, if someone has bipolar disorder where they have extreme highs and lows, they may benefit from a mood stabilizer, which helps to even it out a bit. So there's a huge amount of variation, as there is with any other health condition, in the medicines that are available. Not everyone has to be on medicine. Some people are on medicine and therapy, and some people are just on medicine. So like any health condition, it really depends on the treatment plan the clinician establishes.
Okay, thank you. Marius makes a statement and asks a question. I have MS and I'm a co-leader in a support group who would love to have someone like you speak with our group, but someone who's knowledgeable about chronic illness. I've had a hard time finding someone.
I wonder if that might be a time to reach out to NAMI Northern Virginia. And the reason I say that is I'm sure there are plenty of people in Northern Virginia who experience conditions that would really benefit from having someone talk about having both a combined health condition and experiencing and the benefits of really addressing your mental health and well-being since they're so, as I said earlier, intertwined. So I would reach out to NAMI Northern Virginia, and I think Laura put the link to NAMI Northern Virginia, and just inquire as to whether there might be the opportunity to form a support group that includes people that have both a physical health condition and a mental health condition, or just have a physical health condition and want to learn more about mental health.
Thank you, Darcy. Anne asked the question, or actually asks you the question. You mentioned a book, I'm Not Sick, by Javier somebody.
Yeah, let me.
What is the author's name?
It's Javier Amador, Amador.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Elizabeth asked a question. Oh, the same question. Who is the author of the book you just mentioned? There you go.
Yeah, I was going to actually, if I could have one moment, I'll just quickly pull it up and put it in the chat.
Here.
Um, I am not sick. I don't need help. My apologies.
Yeah.
It's been around for a while. Let me just pull it up real quick I'll pull it up on Goodreads. Oh, and he has developed a program called LEAP. He would be a great person to have on. Let me just, which is listen, empathize, agree, partner. And that's his whole approach. I'm just going to put this link in. This is his book on LEAP, but you'll see, which is another really good read, actually, because it gives you the strategies to, let me put it in the chat here, gives you the strategies for really, we got the chat, addressing the issues you may encounter with someone who doesn't want to take their medicine is this whole idea of listening, really stating that you understand, and then agreeing that it's a good thing to take medicine if you need it, and then forming a partnership around it. And that's his whole approach. And a lot of people love the LEAP method. And I will say the risk of someone who may be experiencing schizophrenia or psychosis, which you often do with schizophrenia, is you can lose insight into your illness if you don't have treatment. People call that anosognosia, which is a secondary condition that you can experience of not having insight. And then you can become highly symptomatic. And people can be delusional, they can be paranoid, they can get into all kinds of issues with the criminal justice system, they can become unhoused. There's so many ways in which people's lives can really spiral downward if they don't have the right treatment and care they need.
Okay, thank you. Carol asked the questions, does NAMI help military veterans?
Yes, in fact, we have our Homefront. So if you go to NAMI.org and look at Homefront, Homefront is a program that is for families and friends of those in the military and veterans. And we also have a Military and Veterans Council on our board that addresses the needs of military families and individuals who are in the military and veterans. And also we have a lot of resources online. So I would look online. There are programs in community. I'm not sure if NAMI Northern Virginia does the Homefront program, but you could check. It's an online program, so you can actually join from anywhere because it's offered and it doesn't have to be in Northern Virginia. So you could go online at NAMI.org and look up Homefront.
Okay, good. Well, I think we've gone to the end of our questions. I did have a question or something I would like your thought on. It's my understanding that much of counseling now is online and not person to person. How is that affecting or effective or just changing the whole business of mental health?
Yeah, that's such a good question. And actually, there are many therapists who have given up their offices, so they don't offer anything but online. And the studies that have been done show that it's just as effective to receive counseling and therapy online as it is to be in person. I think for certain conditions and more serious conditions, it may be advantageous to see someone in person. And that's on the more severe end. And someone would very likely see a psychiatrist anyway because of the medicine and having to see someone in person often to be prescribed medicine. But a lot of therapy is online, and the research shows people are doing well with it. So, and they're doing just as well, and the no-show rates are down, and people come to therapy, and therapists appreciate that. So, it's really it's produced good result.
Well, that's excellent to know because I think you can easily think to yourself, oh, if I'm not going to really see anybody, what good is it? But that's not true, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
So,
And I think therapists have become very skilled at asking the right questions if someone looks different or seems different, so that they don't have to be in the room with them per se. They have a really good sense of what do I need to be asking this person. And but the research is in, like it's we pivoted, as you know, over practically what felt like overnight. I was at the American Psychiatric Association Foundation when COVID hit in 2020, and I saw the APA just pivot to online telepsychiatry, which was incredible because no one would have ever imagined we could do that in a matter of about 4 months. And they had to figure out all the billing and the technology, and it was just and secure lines and HIPAA compliance. And I mean, there were just so many issues to HIPAA, meaning the federal laws that protect health privacy. And it was amazing how we just pivoted into this system. And so we can do it when we have to. And we did. So, and now it's something that some people really like it. Younger people really appreciate. They can log on at lunch at work and see their therapist. They don't have to take that time out to travel, and they rate it very high.
good to
And I
know.
know in my office, people will be speaking to counselors and therapists, and some of them put a note on their door saying, I'm in a therapy session until 1. And
There
yeah.
you go. Okay. One last comment came in here. Mary says, oops, Medicare provides very little coverage and very few mental health providers participate. Is that true from your perspective?
Yes, I think I'm so glad someone mentioned that because, first of all, we have a shortage of providers in this country in the mental health field. So we have a shortage of psychiatrists, we have a shortage of therapists. Second of all, there's this tension that exists between the insurers and the providers. So the therapists, the psychiatrists, when it comes to coverage, um, and the insurers claim the providers are being greedy and they want so much money, it's ridiculous. Um, and the providers who are delivering mental health care will tell you that the administrative burdens that the insurers are placing on providers are excessive, they're business costs, they're ridiculous. And so there's this sort of battle that goes on. And many, many, many mental health professionals do not accept insurance. And it is what many people need to do is to submit the claims. And I'm not as familiar with Medicare per se, but in private insurance plans, that is a very big concern. And we have been trying to battle that at NAMI, knowing that can be cost prohibitive for many people to get the help they need. And they can't afford to pay out of pocket because it can be $150 or more for one therapy session. And it really creates a very two-tiered system. And we're fighting all the time against that. And we're fighting with the provider guilds and the insurers to say, come on, we all need to find a compromise here. But it's a big advocacy project. We just also don't have enough providers. So it's not unusual for people to have to wait months to get an appointment.
Mary also comments that Medicare threatens to stop telehealth. It's approved through September, but after that, it's a question mark, correct?
Yeah, that's a great point. I was actually on a call this morning with the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services on a different issue, but some of the leader, fairly high level folks were saying, I mean, probably a little tongue in cheek, we're working on getting it extended. And I know I will say from the advocacy perspective, we are working on getting that extended as well. We know how important it is. We know the no-show rates are much, much lower. We know people are getting the help they need. We know it's more accessible. And people who have mobility issues and other challenges who can't get out easily to an appointment are very much in favor of continuing this. So we hope that we can really get that extended. We got to bring the pressure to bear, for sure.
Well, I think that's everybody's questions, and I answered my question. So I think we're in good shape. So thank you very much for joining us and having a specific conversation about this, because it really is a crisis. You can feel it just living day to day. So thank you very much, and especially this being a Mental Health Awareness Month. So
Yeah.
Darcy, thank you very much for being with us.
Yeah. You're very
I
welcome. I just want to say one final thing that I really wanted to say earlier, and that is that there's a real concern about a youth mental health crisis in this country. So I know many people have family members. They might have, nieces and nephews and grandchildren and more, and and friends. It's really important that we have conversations, we open conversations about mental health, and we just normalize it. If we normalize it within a family and just start talking more about it, it really opens the door to people feeling safer doing so. It's a cultural thing within families, within businesses, within community. So I would just invite everyone to really start thinking in those terms, because we can all make a difference in the fact that not enough people get help when they need it. So thank you so much for giving me that chance to close with that.
Well, again, thank you for this whole presentation and that final message. So I would remind everybody to please do fill our survey out at the end of this, because we'll provide Darcy with some feedback, and also our upcoming presentations on June 9th with Anne Friedman talking about Planet Word, which is a wonderful museum here in Washington, and also the Museum of Visionary Arts. It's right after that in Baltimore. Again, a virtual presentation. So Darcy, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Be well, everyone. Take
All right,
care.
everybody.